Deja Gordon never thought she'd end up living in Africa.
When I was growing up, I had no intentions on wanting to come to Africa because what they show us is basically all negativity, and I just wanted to come here and see what it was for myself.
A native New Yorker with a Guyanese father and roots in Jamaica, Gordon spent her transformative years visiting Jamaica and embracing its culture. But at 23 years old, she vacationed in Ghana and fell in love with the country and the people there.
The vibe, the energy, the food, the people here, the music, it just reminds me of Jamaica so much.
It was then that Deja decided to start another chapter in her life.
I wanted to be here in Africa. I feel like we as Black people, we need to come back to Africa.
In October, the 28-year-old moved to Accra, Ghana's capital, in search of a new beginning, a slower pace of life, and a way to explore her ancestry more deeply.
I'm driving right now.
Safe driving.
This is my second time driving in Ghana.
NBC News visited her there earlier this year, before the COVID-19 pandemic, to look at what life is like for Americans living in Ghana.
We're finished cooking and we're gonna go take it to the truck and sell it there.
Deja had launched a business, Deja Vu's Jerk Hut, honoring her family and connecting cultures by serving Jamaican fare blended with a few local dishes, spicy jerk chicken, fish, and pork, served with Ghana's jollof rice.
Ghanaians love pepper, so we gotta give them what they love, right?
Yeah, it's called paposhiko.
It's called what?
Paposhiko.
What she said. I have a sense of belonging here. I feel at home. In order to know where you're going, you need to know where you come from. And I feel like that's why a lot of times we are lost in the States, because we don't know who or where we came from. And once you find your roots and you find your history, you have a sense of confidence knowing that, okay, I'm important, I came from important people, my people fought for me to be here today.
She's one of at least 3,000 Black Americans living in Ghana. And like Deja, many returned last year for Ghana's Year of Return initiative, marking 400 years since enslaved Black people first arrived in America, and honoring the resilience of Black people around the world. Countries along the West African coast, including Ghana, were central to the transatlantic slave trade. Dr. Mjiba Frehewa teaches at the University of Ghana.
And I think that the reason that there's a disconnect is certainly because of history, right? We know that the transatlantic slave trade came and ultimately stole millions of African people from the west coast of Africa. And so what you find is that African people have been over 400 years disconnected from their history and culture and even the land base, right, in the diaspora.
Here at Elmina Slave Castle, enslaved people were separated by gender, chained together in dungeons, beaten, raped, and abused. The door of no return would come to symbolize the horror they left behind on the continent and the generations of systemic oppression that they would face in America.
Story of Elmina and all those things are things that we felt that we needed to tell so that we can change the narrative. But then also to show that it's not all doom and gloom, that we survived, that we've been able to go through this, producing presidents, producing musical icons, fashion icons, scientists of repute. Everywhere you go, you realize that the African footprint is still there. And so we needed to celebrate it.
Clap for yourself. Okay.
Josh Fennenberl is a tour guide. He's lived in Ghana his whole life.
I think the more they come in, the more the African continent expands, and the more the idea they have, they bring it onto the continent grows, and then that gap will be closed.
It's a great time to be African, it's a great time to be Black, it's a great time to promote who we are and believe that we are the only people who can push the culture forward. I mean, for me, it's Wakanda forever, and we're here for it.
The Year of Return was fueled by influencers and celebrities, drawing people back to Africa to build connections and network in the backdrop of beaches, nightlife, music, and history. Diallo Sumbri served on the organizing committee.
It's about building deeper ties with communities here and just getting a deeper knowledge of what that return actually means from a spiritual sense, from a business sense, from a social standpoint.
Right now it's going really quite nicely.
This year, Ghana is expanding the initiative, going beyond the return by inviting black people around the world to invest socially and financially in the country and build relationships across borders.
So are you going to connect?
At this design studio, entrepreneurs focused on transforming Africa gathered to brainstorm new ideas.
Beyond the return to me means that you're really harvesting the opportunity that's here to say that in 50, 100, 200 years, I've built a legacy here that not only transformed my community, but now my children, my children's children can come back and show their roots in the true history of not just Ghana, but Africa and beyond.
Ghana's officials are committed to continuing to foster those international connections. The country is making visa approval easier and granting citizenship through special programs. The government hopes to increase the annual number of tourists from 1 million to 8 million by 2027. Tourism officials say the money brought in goes directly into the local economy.
We are saying that Ghana is a land of opportunity for the global African family, that there are so many opportunities in agriculture, in the real estate, in the creative arts.
To the extent that we do get multinationals coming in, what I'm hoping will happen is that we can have that exchange around entrepreneurial values, which I see in Ghanaian youth already.
What's up, brother?
Thank you, man.
I'm gonna come back and get one of those.
NFL veteran Malcolm Jenkins says his 3 trips to Ghana shed a light on his own history.
Everything's black, black, black. A lot of us don't know, our own heritage. A lot of that history is wiped away or really hard to find. And so I think we're all kind of on this journey to really figure out, where do we come from? What is our history?
Oh, yeah.
He's now buying a piece of land to eventually build a vacation home. He says economic investment in Africa is critical.
I think it's a ripe time for African Americans as they make that journey back to the homeland to actually lay roots, and play a part in the process of really building a strong and unified Africa.
That's an appealing prospect for some black Americans who may feel displaced or even afraid in the U.S. In May, protests erupted around the country over the death of 46-year-old George Floyd in Minneapolis after video surfaced showing a police officer kneeling on Floyd's neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds as Floyd said, "I can't breathe," multiple times, with 3 other officers on the scene. All 4 officers were fired and later arrested. The officer at the center of the case was charged with second-degree murder and manslaughter, and the 3 other officers charged with aiding and abetting second-degree murder. In 2014, the Black Lives Matter movement became widely recognized after activists took to the streets calling for justice for Michael Brown after he was fatally shot by a police officer in Ferguson, Missouri. 1 month earlier, 43-year-old Eric Garner died while being physically restrained by a police officer in New York. In the cases of Brown and Garner, grand juries did not indict the officers. Neither was found to have committed civil rights violations. Between 2013 and 2018, black men and boys were 2.5 times more likely than white men and boys to die in an encounter with police. Black women, nearly 1.5 times more likely to be killed by police than white women.
When you start talking about social issues in America, then you begin to think, is there something outside of America, right? And then you begin to say, well, what happens before my people got here? And then it's just an easy, connection back to the African continent. So I definitely think that social movements truly help to politically educate people in order to think beyond really think beyond their space.
And I just came to it.
Ama Oboje was raised in Maryland. She and Diallo, who have both decided to live here, are disheartened by racism in America.
You think that, oh, America's so great, but when you go there, your body is weaponized. Your body is seen as a threat. You as a black man being on the street laughing, dapping up your people that you do in your village and everybody thinks is normal, when you go somewhere else, it's seen as violent. It's seen as disruptive.
They go back home to some of these same oppressive, very difficult environments for young black men and women with stop and frisk and people still getting killed by the police or even getting killed in their own neighborhoods. And they go home with a sense of renewal and hope from being here.
Ghana has a population of 29 million. It's politically stable, and its economy driven by gold, cocoa, and oil. It was the first sub-Saharan nation to break free from colonial rule in 1957.
The first independent African state in the Commonwealth.
Ghana and the U.S. established a diplomatic relationship in the late 1950s. In 1961, Ghana's President Kwame Nkrumah met with President John F. Kennedy.
We share the same basic aspiration for Africa that he wishes for.
We all look forward to a period of continued cooperation and understanding between our two countries.